We experience choices as our own. You decide what to eat, who to love, what to say. But human behavior is never truly random. According to the principle of strict psychic determinism, every conscious choice, slip of the tongue, and sudden anxiety is the mathematical result of unobservable, unconscious structural conflicts. Before the turn of the 20th century, the prevailing medical consensus viewed the unconscious mind as a passive, dormant storage bin, a quiet archive for discarded or forgotten memories. Sigmund Freud redefined the unconscious as a highly pressurized, dynamic force that dictates our waking lives. This shift was grounded in the scientific climate of the era. Following Charles Darwin, humanity was reclassified as a biological component of the animal kingdom. We were no longer being separated from nature by an immortal soul. This meant human emotion and behavior could be studied with the same deterministic rigor scientists applied to physical anatomy. By treating humans as biological objects, this model suggests that the conscious mind is only the surface of a larger machine, one governed by the same deterministic laws that move the rest of the natural world. Freud did not begin his career as a psychotherapist. He was a research neurologist working in Vienna. He spent his formative years conducting physiological research under the German scientist Ernst Brücke, studying the mechanistic systems of living organisms. This diagram illustrates the bedrock law of 19th century physics, the conservation of energy. In a closed system, energy can change state, but the total amount remains constant. It cannot be annihilated. Freud extracted this law from thermodynamics and applied it to human emotion. He formulated the concept of psychic energy, conceptualizing the human personality as a closed energy system that functions like a steam engine. The implication is severe. If psychic energy cannot be destroyed, any emotional impulse blocked from normal expression will remain trapped in the system until it finds an unpredictable outlet. Freud attempted to build a mechanical physics of the human soul, translating abstract desires into a system of quantifiable laws. To trace how this pressure moves, Freud needed a map. This effort culminated in his 1923 tripartite structural model of the mind. At the base is the id, the generator of raw psychic energy. It demands immediate discharge through two primal vectors, eros, the drive for life, and thanatos, the drive for destruction. Pushing back is the superego, an unconscious screening mechanism built from societal rules. The superego acts as a moral constraint, automatically blocking unacceptable biological drives. Caught between them is the ego. This is your conscious self, existing in the space between biology and society. The ego has an exhausting function. It must constantly negotiate and reconcile the biological pressure of the id with the moral constraints of the superego. Every conscious thought and rationalization occurs within this pressurized middle layer. In this model, human consciousness is a vibrating pressure valve, struggling to prevent a total rupture. A systemic crisis occurs whenever an unacceptable biological drive threatens the survival of the ego. When this happens, the mind deploys its central defense mechanism, repression. The ego forcefully pushes the dangerous impulse back down into the unconscious. Because of the law of conservation of energy, pushing the drive away does not destroy it. The impulse remains intact and pressurized below the surface. To keep it there, the ego must continuously burn its own limited psychic energy just to maintain the seal. The most powerful of these repressions originate in the developmental stages of early childhood. Freud's theory of infantile sexuality posits that from birth, children are biologically driven to release energy through bodily pleasure, which inherently clashes with parental restrictions. The child moves through distinct stages, the oral, anal, and phallic, learning to redirect these biological drives. If a child fails to resolve an early conflict, they develop a fixation. This permanently traps psychic energy in an unyielding, repressed state. Repression is a necessary childhood survival mechanism. The mind survives the immediate moral threat, but at the cost of a lifetime of pressurized internal warfare. You cannot infinitely pressurize a closed system. The trapped energy eventually leaks out, mutating into transmuted forms. When the vigilance of the superego drops, most notably during sleep, these repressed desires slip through the cracks as dreams. In his text, The Interpretation of Dreams, Freud distinguished between manifest content, the surface-level narrative of a dream, and latent content, the actual repressed desire driving it. This energy leakage also manifests in waking life. Unresolved childhood fixations become the mechanical causes of irrational phobias and obsessive behaviors, or physical hysterical paralysis. Psychoanalysis is an engineered therapeutic extraction method designed to induce a mechanical purge or catharsis. Through the talking cure and free association, the analyst purposefully deprives the patient of sensory input to disarm the superego and allow the buried conflict to surface. The final step of the cure requires the ego to consciously acknowledge the repressed energy, discharging it and removing the underlying pressure. In the Freudian framework, a neurotic symptom is a predictable exhaust leak. The cure is simply locating the blockage and opening the valve. But there is a scientific flaw embedded in this mechanical model of the mind. Decades later, the philosopher Karl Popper established a modern scientific standard known as the criterion of demarcation, or falsifiability. Popper argued a genuinely scientific theory must allow for observations that could definitively prove it false. The trap of psychoanalysis is that it forms an inescapable loop, so elastic it's compatible with every possible human behavior. If a patient accepts the analyst's diagnosis, it proves the theory. If the patient fiercely denies the diagnosis, the analyst labels it resistance, which is also used as proof that the underlying theory is correct. Because unobservable causes, like repressed energy, can only be identified by the behaviors they supposedly cause, the entire system relies on circular reasoning. Because psychoanalysis cannot be disproven, modern critics often categorize it closer to an ideological mythology than a hard physical science. Psychoanalysis fails the strict empirical tests of the thermodynamic physics it originally sought to emulate. Yet Freud's architecture of the soul remains our most enduring framework for understanding the dark, pressurized depths of human motivation.